but will they follow the Biden administration, or will Canada do nothing? Well, let's find out what the Canadian Olympic Committee thinks. Joining me now is David Shoemaker. He's the CEO and Secretary General of the Canadian Olympic Committee. Always a pleasure to have you on the program, sir. Does the Canadian Olympic Committee support a diplomatic boycott of the Games?
Thanks for having me on, Evan. We'll support what the Canadian government ultimately decides. I obviously am paying very close attention to this issue. We saw with interest the announcement coming out of the United States earlier today. And as you just mentioned, took great notice that that's explicitly not an athlete boycott. And that's very important to me, as I've come on the show before saying it's very important to me that athletes, Canadian athletes, are at these Winter Games, notwithstanding the myriad challenges and questions and concerns that we have about what's going on in the host country.
I know there's serious. I mean, one of the issues is there might be a diplomatic boycott. So if there is a diplomatic boycott, so let me just make sure I got this on the record. If Canada does join a diplomatic boycott and you're asked, do you support that, you would say yes.
Sure. I mean, look, it's a little tricky, Evan, because you're asking me to comment on something that the Minister of Sport or the Prime Minister might announce in a couple days.
Right.
I'd support a solution that at the end of the day allows 225 or so Canadian athletes to go and compete at the Winter Olympic Games next year. And if that means a diplomatic boycott, I'd support it. I think it'll be difficult not to have government officials at the Games. There may be consequences to it, but I would nonetheless support it, yes.
Has the government asked for your advice on this?
The government is not. We've been in close contact for a long period of time now, as we've seen the issues related to these games and others. We're still dealing with the COVID pandemic and the impact of that. We got through the Summer Games in Tokyo, and those issues continue to confront us now. And so we're in regular contact with the government and on a whole host of issues. Our participation in those games are among them, but we really haven't been asked our opinion as to whether government officials should go.
And have you talked to other Olympic committees in other countries and said, look, we're expecting, a diplomatic boycott is clearly on the table. The U.S. is doing it. We just heard that Canadian officials are clearly talking to other countries to try to get together and have a multilateral effort here. Have you talked to other Olympic committees who are expecting the same thing?
Yeah, we're talking to routinely talk to what we call our Five Eyes Olympic committees, so the Olympic committees of the U.S. and Great Britain, Australia, New Zealand. And we also speak to those from sort of the winter sport powerhouses, Norway and the Netherlands and some of the others. Frankly, what's surprising to me is how little these issues in China are registering on the radars in many of these other countries. They're of great concern to Canadians, as we know. We had the hostage diplomacy situation with Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig, and perhaps that accentuated things a little bit, Evan. But I must say, I've been a little surprised by how much how little it's registered in some other parts of the world.
Okay, well, it's registered clearly in the U.S., and we'll find out. One of the other issues, Michael Shoemaker, is the issue of the Chinese tennis star Peng Shuai. Not an Olympic athlete in this particular games, but it's become one of these critical issues. She had made allegations on November 2nd that on the Chinese social media called Weibo, essentially the Chinese Facebook, that she had been sexually molested or assaulted by a high-ranking member of the Communist Party. It was immediately pulled down, but it still went viral by other means. Then she essentially disappeared. Then she made what many human rights organizations made this video that no one's seen except the Chinese government and Thomas Bach, the president of the IOC, the International Olympic Committee. And there's been two of these meetings. The Women's Tennis Federation Association has canceled China. Other human rights leaders are saying the IOC is essentially acting as a quisling or in collusion with China by not releasing the video, these sort of proof of life videos, and colluding with China to try to make this issue go away. Did the IOC overstep its bounds by making this video of Peng Shuai and then never releasing it and be transparent about it?
Yeah, well, there's a lot in there, Evan, and in fact there are two videos that the IOC had nothing to do with. One would have been a video of her appearing at a tennis clinic, and another one, somewhat bizarrely, photographing her dining at a luncheon or a dinner. The two videos that Thomas Bach was involved in, I guess, were then video conferences that involved another IOC member, as well as some people with Peng Shuai at the other end of the call. It's hard to say. I mean, I would certainly like to know a fair bit more, as I'm sure most people would who've seen these videos, about Peng Shuai's circumstances and how she's come to appear on those videos. What is encouraging, at least, is that there have been, two of these with the IOC. I understand they've made a date to see each other in January when Thomas Bach is in China. So at least for those who are, concerned for her safety, I guess you could say, well, then at least she will appear in January again. But yeah, it still leaves a lot to be questioned.
Last question. Given what happened to Peng Shuai, the tennis player, and given how China has responded to it, the two Michaels, if a Canadian athlete, one of the over two, decides to make a statement, is the Canadian Olympic Committee worried about the potential safety of athletes in China from the Chinese government?
Safety for our athletes is our paramount concern wherever we go. We just had the Junior Pan American Games in Cali, Colombia, and our athletes are returning from those games right now. In these games in particular, Evan, we've got to think a lot about COVID and the countermeasures that are in place in China, and there's a lot still unanswered from that standpoint in terms of how we're getting there, how the circumstances will be in the satellite villages. There's 3 different sort of zones, competition zones, and then of course the area of free expression. The IOC amended the rules to free expression prior to the Tokyo Games to provide enhanced opportunities for athletes to freely express themselves, and has been assured from the host organizers in China that they will fully adhere to those. We will lean on the IOC heavily to allow Canadian athletes who choose to express themselves to be able to do so in a way that's safe and secure for them.
All right. Well, less than 60 days is going to be a big event. We'll find out if there is indeed a diplomatic boycott here. David Shoemaker, thank you, sir. I really appreciate it. CEO and Secretary General of the Canadian Olympic Committee. Great to have you on the program.
Thank you, Evan.